Narayana namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam mudiraye. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So we are continuing our discussion of Canto 3, and this is chapter 16. Now, oftentimes, one wonders about the position of devotees who are exalted. In other words, they have done an extraordinarily good job in being able to serve Srila Prabhupada. They have broadcasted the mission. They have made themselves available to Srila Prabhupada. And they've traveled around the world. They have sacrificed so much. But then you find that the very same devotees, and there's so many histories in our movement, the very same devotees, they fall down in seemingly unbelievable ways. It's almost as if you can't believe that these challenges can come to these exalted devotees because, they have done so much service. They have attracted so many jivas into the movement of Srila Prabhupada, and they have served Srila Prabhupada so sincerely, where they are practically they have sacrificed so much. They have sacrificed immensely. It's just unbelievable. The amount of sacrifice that was done by the predecessors, which is the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, is just unbelievable. It was unprecedented. And it was a very different time. It was a very different time because they pioneered. And whenever someone pioneers, they have a propensity for, I would say, gaining a lot because they receive a lot of mercy, because they're taking all kinds of risks. And then they're also quite vulnerable because they're pioneering. So they're entering into regions which they're not quite familiar with. They're doing things which they may not be comfortable with. The resources themselves could be very limited. Just as in this case, those days, Srila Prabhupada was writing the books. And then devotees used to go and distribute books and then take standing orders for delivering books to the libraries and the professors around the world that were yet to be written by Srila Prabhupada. That was book distribution that was done in those days, that they had capacity to convince the audience about Srila Prabhupada's books. And Srila Prabhupada's books were so wonderful that the audience used to book in advance so that they could keep receiving. And there used to be standing orders that whenever your guru writes, we need a copy in our library, we need a copy in our department, different universities around the world. And this was the kind of sacrifice. So there was an enormous amount of sacrifice. They put their lives at risk, literally. And then you find that they reached a certain level of, what I would call as vulnerability, where they also fall down into situations which one can't even imagine. And one starts thinking, where they're already vulnerable, what was the circumstance? And then given the propensity for what I would call as prajalpa, given the propensity for discussing devotees casually, which is so prevalent in the present time, especially since the time of social media, there's so much discussion casually of devotees, of Vaishnavas, who are suffering in different ways because they never intended to put themselves in the circumstances they're in, but they have found themselves in the circumstances they're in. And then there's so much which is basically being talked about, and it is being basically discussed about them in social media in very derogatory terms, as if it is important to broadcast this as a message to the everybody. So it is not so much that we want to talk about circumstances, but we want to understand the nature of fall downs, because no one in their right mind wants to fall down. Nobody does. Nobody wants to fall down. No one wants to join this movement to just fall down. We should understand that. So why is it that there is this phenomenon that exalted personalities, and I use the word exalted because they've rendered such service, and we should train ourselves to observe things that are happening, which means that if you physically see a manifestation of people being able to bring devotees, culture them, and then pioneer, take risks for Srila Prabhupada, then we should learn to respect them. We should learn to respect those who are very good in their sadhana. We should learn to respect things that are observable. And the reason why it's important is because we should culture our mind to observe and accept what it sees in the physical platform. It's very important because a lot of assumptions can be made. So it's very important for us to actually observe what is going on, and then we respect them. But then we also find the other side, where oftentimes we find that these devotees who have served so much are falling prey to somewhat minuscule, or I would use the word, somewhat very diminished circumstances where you wouldn't really call that a risk, or you wouldn't even put yourself into that risk. And then you suddenly are in the circumstances where, they get snared and they fall down, and then it gets broadcast as if they've always been evil. This is the nature of what goes on for most part. This is the bhakti displayed overall in social media for most part. There's a lot of discussion on the weakness of devotees. There's a lot of discussion on what went wrong rather than what was positive. And this is very, very unfortunate, but this is the truth. While we say that, yes, it should be shared, it should be monitored, nothing should be hidden. But at the same time, one needs to understand that even though you don't hide anything and you don't basically suppress anything, it is not so wonderful to discuss things as if someone needs to be demonized for their weakness. So there's a big difference. So one needs to understand this. One needs to understand the phenomenon of personalities in our movement who served Srila Prabhupada very sincerely, but then they fell prey. Now, what is it that we should understand from this? Because there are circumstances where some devotees carry weakness in their hearts from several lifetimes that they haven't resolved. It's a part of who they are. It's like a disease. It's like some kind of a cancerous cell that's within their bodies, which keeps gnawing away. They resist and they resist and they resist. And then one day, because they have constantly been exposed to a phenomenon which is not natural, which means they're not in their elements, they're not in a protected environment. ISKCON sannyasis, they expose themselves to environments which no sannyasi in the traditional sense would expose themselves to. So it's a very non-traditional approach which was adopted by Srila Prabhupada for growing Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement. So all kinds of risks were taken, all kinds of risks. And they used to find themselves in circumstances which no one would believe. No one would believe they would find themselves in such circumstances. So sometimes you wonder, what is it which happens here? How come someone so sincere could have so much trouble? Where they're carrying this trouble. In some cases, they carry it for lifetimes. It is a part of them. It does not mean that they're insincere. It simply means that it's a part of them. They carry it, and sometimes they get overwhelmed because they're not able to overcome that particular aspect of who they are. And why does it come out? Why is it manifesting? Why does that particular weakness manifest? Why would you find someone risking so much? Someone is a guru with thousands of disciples, and then you find that he falls for a female disciple at quite an advanced age, or at an age where he has a lot of honor, a lot of respect, a lot of responsibility in the movement, and then you find that, oh my God, he suddenly falls for something extraordinarily diminished compared to what he already had. So one wonders, what was this going on? What is this going on? So we need to understand this phenomenon. There are multiple reasons. One is someone could be truly weak and they could succumb to the environment because the environment is quite challenging. And because they travel around, they travel in Western society. And I mean, when I say Western society, India is the same. There really isn't any difference. I don't want to use the word Western society because it's just a concept where there's a lot of free movement between the genders, which is how the world has transformed itself. So it's not unusual that if you have to preach, you're coming in touch with the opposite gender, and you're quite vulnerable if you already have a problem that's been gnawing at you for a long time. And if you don't know how to get rid of it, and if the sadhana is not intense enough, then you're going to fall prey to this. So the question is, how do we judge what is a genuine situation versus a situation where someone has really had this problem and the rest of it has just been some kind of a display at some level or the other? The way you see that is that If devotees who fall down, they have one characteristic. Devotees who fall down are stripped of all honor. They lose their respect in society. They're stripped of all honor, and especially if they're highly placed. Imagine a guru falling down is a devastating, it's a very big devastation, not only for the disciples, but also for the person who falls down. A guru falling down means that he's practically going to be looked at in the opposite of what he was all these years. So he's going through trauma himself, and he knows that the trauma that he's experiencing, you know, is so great, and nobody else can understand it because that person would know what it is, because he has already been in an exalted position and he falls down. Now, one needs to understand, how do we judge this? It's because you need to know if a devotee is very sincere, because when a devotee falls down, especially those who have been in very good positions, they lose everything. They don't have any identity. They don't have any upadhi. Upadhi means a covering. There is no cloth that covers them. It's over. Everything has been stripped away by Krishna. It's almost like as if they have become a beggar. They have become a homeless beggar. They are practically someone who has nothing because everything has been taken away from them. Then they are isolated by society, and then you have all the engines of gossip that go on, that they vilify the person as if, he's a demon, and they have really nothing. And then they have one thing though. They have one thing. They have their beat back. They have Prabhupada. Because they serve Prabhupada, and Prabhupada is extraordinarily compassionate. Srila Prabhupada reaches out and he holds on to his sons and daughters, even though they have made a mistake. Why does Srila Prabhupada do that? And how do you know Srila Prabhupada has done that to the devotee? Because after everything has been taken away from the devotee, if you find the devotee humbly chanting, if you find the devotee humbly chanting, if you find the devotee leading the life of, I would say, a regular person, but then holding on to their beat bag and humbly chanting, and then actually repenting the position, because they really are going through a lot of trauma. It's unbelievable. And because one, as your consciousness rises, the suffering would be even greater. Please understand that. Suffering is not manifest to those in the mode of ignorance. An animal, sometimes you wonder when you walk in the streets of Vrindavan even, you find pigs submerged in sewer water. And they seem so blissful submerged in sewer water that you start wondering, how could this even be? Because they're almost blissful submerged in sewer water. So the mode of ignorance, you don't suffer much in one sense, even though for someone of a higher consciousness, you recognize that it is simply 100% suffering. But as you grow higher and higher in consciousness, the suffering is even more greater when there's trauma, because there's a greater level of knowledge, there's a greater level of awareness. So when mistakes are being made by those of a higher station, the repentance and grief is enormous. Why? Because they've already experienced a higher level of consciousness. They haven't really escaped from the material situation, but they have experienced a higher level of consciousness. As a consequence, they suffer like anything. So there's heavy trauma experienced by these devotees. In addition, they have been stripped of everything. They have no upadhi. They can't hide behind any cloak. They're out there, finished. Everybody sees them, and everybody makes their own assumption based on who they are. Now, all they have is their connection to Srila Prabhupada, and all they have is their beat bag. So if you see a devotee who has fallen down, holding on to their beat bag and calling upon Krishna's names, then please pay obeisances as you did before, because that devotee is quite fortunate. Everything has been taken away from them. They only have Krishna. They only have Prabhupada. They don't have anything else. They can't go and posture in the world anymore. They can't pretend to be elevated. They can't do anything. They just have nothing but the beat bag, and it is such a wonderful relief for many. So why does Srila Prabhupada care for his sons and daughters who fall down? Srila Prabhupada cares for his sons and daughters who fall down because Krishna cares for souls who have served him. Being Krishna conscious means you care for devotees. Krishna cares for these souls. Prabhupada cares for these souls because he is completely Krishna conscious. As a consequence, he picks them up, allows them an opportunity to hold on to the beatback, gives them mercy, gives them intelligence, because if he finds that they're sincere, he would give them intelligence for them to be able to make progress. In one sense, from a spiritual vantage point, it is a great advantage. They don't have followers anymore. Nobody bows down to them. Nobody cares if they exist. They don't have any position. They can't give a class anywhere. They can't do anything. All they have is the bead bag, Srila Prabhupada and Krishna in their hearts, and they hold on to it. So why does this happen to our devotees sometimes? This is a glorious thing. It is glorious because this is actually the intervention of Krishna. Krishna recognizes that this person has been holding on to something in their heart for a very long time. They've been struggling with it, struggling with it, struggling with it. They've been actually giving resources that they could use for advancement in Krishna consciousness towards this particular issue which they're trying to suppress. It is there, it is this, it's there in their heart. They're just trying to fight it, fight it, fight it. And then Krishna sees that because he is the Lord in the heart. He sees that. Because he sees that, he says, okay, let's get it over with. I'm going to push you towards that objective that you have been so dearly wanting. Yeah, you have been wanting that particular desire to be fulfilled. You want to go for it. So I'm going to push you to actually go for it so that it is out in the open and you realize the duality of your desires. So he pushes these people and creates an environment which practically pushes them into the arms of Maya to such an extent that they actually experience their desire, but the consequences are horrible. And what happens? They're relieved of this issue and they're relieved of their identity. Now they have the identity of a devotee. They just have the beatback, they have Prabhupada, they have Krishna. Now they have the opportunity for real service because you can start building because you don't have any upadhi. You don't have any false notions for coming to the temple. Because we all complain when we go to the temple that someone is not treating me well, someone has done this, someone has done that. There's so much that goes on in our temples. And it is true because if you build a building, if you have a building with 4 walls, you put a door and you put a name on it, you're going to create a political atmosphere. It is just how the world is created. We just don't have a choice. Because where do we recruit our devotees from? Where do we recruit our devotees from? We recruit our devotees from the corporate world. In the corporate world, this is the day. This is how it begins and this is how it ends. Your success is determined by how good you are in maneuvering. Yeah, it is all there is. Higher you go, the greater the maneuvering, the greater the manipulation. So that's how you're determined, your success is determined. And this is true of any big institution. This is exactly the case. So when we recruit from there, you're going to bring the particular part of that experience into our institution as well. So there is going to be competition. There is going to be what I would call as politics. There is going to be issues of disrespect due to service. All kinds of complications can come simply because that consciousness is now a part of us and we're trying to work through it. Everybody eventually, they kind of sober down, but it takes time. So while the sobering process is on, you have a lot of incidents that occur where people grieve, people are hurt, so on and so forth. So the point we want to make is, you need to recognize when Krishna is involved in a fall down. The way to recognize it is when you find that devotee becoming a sincere chanter, when you find the devotee holding on to the bead bag, coming and then exposing themselves to all the vulnerabilities. Yeah, they're exposing themselves to all the vulnerabilities. They're exposing themselves to all the ridicule, and they've lost everything. And then you find them chanting, and you find them acting in a manner which is just wonderful. It's just amazing that they have this position. Yeah, we have some of those cases. I don't want to mention names, but the point is that we need to recognize that this is Krishna. In our society, we should remember that if you're interacting with devotees, if something were to happen to us through the arms of a devotee, through the hands of a devotee, it is simply because Krishna wants that particular experience to come through. We should accept it in that manner. We spoke about it in the previous session as well. But I just want to emphasize that this is how you recognize that, okay, Krishna wants us to go through this. Because Krishna is not absent. You can never judge what is happening in your life as a devotee if you remove Krishna. It will be meaningless. The Krishna factor is always there. If you want to comprehend life, you need to accept that Krishna has played a role. He has played a role, and sometimes you may not like it. He has played a role. He has played a role which is going to help us. This is how Yogamaya operates. Sri Yogamaya operates using our karma. She looks at the karmic propensities. She is looking at what we bring on the table from the previous lifetime. What do we have as a consolidated offering of karma? And then she takes what is supposed to be taken away. She mellows what needs to be mellowed. And then she enhances what needs to be enhanced so that the yoga between the soul and Krishna is particularly more successful. Because her business is to take us towards Krishna. So she will manage our karma in a very, very intricate, very, very particularly wonderful way. To the extent to which we surrender, we are in her hands. She will manage the karma. So if something is not needed, it will not be occurring. If something is required, we need to accept it as Krishna's arrangement. We need to learn to accept things in our life as Krishna's arrangement. Even if it is not Krishna's arrangement, accept it. Because if you accept it, Krishna's servants will use it to bring you closer to him. This is how it is managed. This is how it's arranged. Because Sri Yogamaya looks at us and arranges everything. So there are devotees who take a nosedive into, what I would call as ridicule and so on and so forth by society because of their activities and because they take a nosedive, particularly because they've been in a high position and then they fall down. And those devotees, if they humble themselves and you find them chanting, understand that Krishna has played a role. If they have moved away and they have given up the society of devotees to get all together, then we have to observe them and we have to make an attempt to bring them back, to whatever extent we can. That is our responsibility. But at the same time, we also need to recognize that our own view of Krishna consciousness is very limited. Our own view of life is very limited. It is highly limited to just the particular lifetime we are looking at. In reality, Krishna has a very, very big view. He has a view that, okay, I'm going to let him go for this lifetime, but then I'll pull him back the next lifetime. I'll pull him back the lifetime after. So he has a view which is very different, which extends beyond lifetimes. Our view is very narrow, it's very limited. So we don't want to jump to conclusions about the journey of a devotee. If they've come in touch with Krishna and they've served him with their limbs, just as Srila Rupa Goswami wanted, he wanted us to serve with our limbs and he wanted us to use our limbs. Be assured that Krishna will pick us up because this is how it works. Krishna will pick us up, there will be cooperation. There might be complexities in the present day, but it doesn't mean that that complexity means the end of the devotee. Krishna never forgets. He never forgets. Prabhupada never forgets. They never forget any service that's been offered. And as a consequence, these arrangements are being made lifetime after lifetime to pull these souls back. And then sometimes, in most cases, they keep repeating the same mistakes. They keep repeating the same mistakes in the same way as possible, simply because the subtle body carries impressions, and those impressions basically force the person to act in a certain way, which is similar, not the same, but similar to what they used to be in the previous lifetime. So the same pattern of problem comes up again and again. So Krishna pushes them and says, okay, do this, and then get it over with. You're going to lose everything. You're going to be alone. You're going to have nothing. And then you'll hold on to the beat bag. That is all you'll have. So Krishna basically arranges this. Now, in this particular chapter, we notice that Jaya and Vijaya, they're cursed by the sages. But Krishna, which is Lord Narayan, Vishnu, he is so worried about their future. And then finally he reveals that it was ordained by him. So how do you fight a circumstance that has been ordained by the Lord himself? You cannot fight a circumstance ordained by Krishna. So you have a circumstance here where the Lord reveals that I have ordained this. And Mother Lakshmi, who is this consort of Sri Narayan, she spoke of this as well. And how did she speak? She was actually stopped by Jaya and Vijaya, or she was prevented at a time when they became overzealous in protecting the Yoga Nidra, the Nidra of Lord Vishnu. So Lord Vishnu was, in Yoga Nidra, and then to protect the Yoga Nidra, they practically prevented Mother Lakshmi from entering the chambers. Jaya and Vijaya. So she became quite infuriated at being prevented from entering the chambers because it was highly inappropriate. She always resides at the lotus feet of the Lord. She's always in the heart of the Lord. So to prevent her from entering is as good as preventing Krishna from entering, or Lord Vishnu from entering his own chambers. So Jaya and Vijaya made that mistake because of overzealousness, but then it is also because they are tatastha. What is the meaning of tatastha? Because the Vaikuṇṭha planet himself, if it is in the border and if they are gatekeepers and if they are particularly in the border touching the material sky, you're vulnerable to mistakes because you're in touch with material nature. Material nature particularly can make one very vulnerable to mistakes. So you're materially, when you're in touch with that, then you make an offense because you're in touch with material nature. And then that offense itself does not disqualify the person permanently. But Krishna wanted to get this out. He wanted this offensive nature of Jaya and Vijaya to stop. So there was a precedence even before coming in touch with Sanat Kumaras and the Kumara brothers, to stopping the Kumara brothers. Yeah, there was a precedent even before that. There was some kind of a precedent created even before that. You see, there was a situation that was created even before where Mother Lakshmi was stopped. So there is some attitude which had come in Jaya and Vijaya, which was noticed, and Krishna wanted this out. And because he wanted this out, he practically ordained that they would go through this intense experience of falling into material nature because they were displaying characteristics that were a part of material nature. The characteristic of material nature is to forget Krishna. So Krishna says in the beginning of this chapter, he says, as he is seeking forgiveness for his servants, he's telling them that they ignored me. They ignored me. So when you ignore Krishna, then you make mistakes with the Vaishnavas. This is basically how it is. Because people distinguishes. This is the behavior of Kanishtas. Kanishta Adhikari would take care of the deities, but they would have no respect for the Vaishnavas. They would have no respect at all for the Vaishnavas. They wouldn't basically be, interested in taking care of the Vaishnavas, etc. This is basically a display of a Kanishta Adhikari behavior where it's very highly narrow, and it's because the knowledge itself is not complete, and so on and so forth. So this display by Jaya and Vijaya of putting Krishna in the center, but then keeping the Vaishnavas out, and including Mother Lakshmi, at some point they even offended her, is simply a display of Kanishta Adhikara, where they really can't understand the full extent of the Lord's control and the Lord's, what I would call as the Lord's connection to the devotees. And this is not because they were not qualified. You cannot be the Vaikuṇṭha doorkeeper, Jaya and Vijaya, whom Krishna interacts with, and we are a part of Srimad Bhagavatam. You cannot be all part of it if they are small people. They are exalted souls, but because of being in touch with material nature, they are at the door. When you're at the door, you are in touch with both the worlds. You are in touch with the Tatastha Lakshana of being a Jiva, which is the Jiva is in touch with the Bahiranga Shakti and also the Antaranga Shakti because of nature. As a consequence, the chances of falling into the material world do exist when someone is right at the border. In this particular situation, it was quite prominently the case. So Jaya and Vijaya, they were pushed to actually prevent the Kumaras from entering. They were ordained internally. Why were they ordained internally? Because they exhibited the quality of material nature of forgetting Krishna, which means they remember the Lord, but they forgot the Vaishnavas. They remember the Lord, but they forget that Mother Lakshmi is the internal potency of the Lord. They forgot the Lord. So ignoring Krishna means you don't really know what he really cares about. What does he care about? You see, they don't know that fully. So they ignored him, and which is the statement made by Vishnu when he comes running down, when Lord Vishnu comes running down to prevent further problems. He practically says that they ignored me. They ignored me. Why did they ignore him? Because they were very focused on him, but they didn't focus on the Vaishnavas. They were very focused on him, but they weren't focused on the consort, the goddess of fortune. It is like differentiating between the different connections. This particular attitude comes because the ignorance itself is coming due to being in touch with material nature. Because in material nature, there's a lot of duality, there's a lot of division, and it is, you can just see it, that there are so many different divisions of who can enter, who cannot enter, who is supposed to be where, and how one can connect, and so on and so forth. There's so much politics that is caused here And this is a part of the material world. Everybody is anxious about their position. That includes the king of heavens. Lord Indra is constantly anxious that someone is going to come and usurp his throne. Someone is going to sit there. They're going to kick him out. This is constant anxiety. This is a part of material nature. And this material nature attitude is because they are tatastha. Now, it is interesting that in Sri Vrindavan Dham and Mayapur, there is a very, very thin layer of material energy. When I say very thin layer of material energy, I mean that with some level of effort, one can have very profound spiritual experiences in Vrindavan and Mayapur. When some level of effort, you can part the material layer. If you become sincere with japa, if you become sincere with seva, then you have the ability to part the material layer and experience the spiritual layer. And it is very, very easy to do it in the Dham. It is very easy. But it is also somewhat of a difficult situation, because if you are in the Dham and you act according to material nature, which is you differentiate, you do this and you do that, then material nature overwhelms us to such an extent that we are not able to experience anything of spiritual world while being in the Dham, because everything becomes hidden by material nature. So in a similar fashion, the Jaya and Vijaya situation is they are in touch with material energy because they are tatastha, they are right at the gate. Tata. Tata means the bank. Tata means the shore, that which divides the water from land. So one can say they are right on the shore, right on the wall that basically divides the spiritual from the material, and as a consequence, they are vulnerable because they can come in touch with material energy, which was what was noticed by the Lord. Since it was noticed by the Lord, he desired to actually push it. He pushed it and he said, I ordained it. And as a consequence, they ended up assuming different things about what he wanted and what he needed. And they stopped the Vaishnavas from coming in a crude way, which is they stopped the Kumaras from coming in. And the Kumaras basically became angry. They are also being ordained, because when Krishna ordains it, every player plays their role, you see. So Jaya and Vijaya stops the sages. The sages become angry, which is unusual for someone in the mode of goodness. So they practically become very upset and angry. And this cursing, the cursing is the mode of ignorance. This cursing, again, is a part of, when you ordain it, it also becomes a part of what happens with people who normally aren't like that. So you find cursing by the Kumaras, Jaya and Vijaya's misbehavior by actually showing they're agitated and angry, which is all the mode of ignorance and passion. And then the cursing comes, and all of this is being orchestrated because Krishna wanted it to happen. He ordained it. And why did he ordain it? Because he wanted these doorkeepers to get it out. It's been in you, and you keep committing the same offenses. It's better for you to get it out. Go take a deep look at what this is. What is material energy? What is the nature of duality? Go take a deep look and become a personality who in reality would take a very deep dive into material nature. So they became demons. This particular situation is such that Krishna ordains it. So we need to recognize that when Krishna ordains it, you will find that these personalities, Jaya and Vijaya, they can't forget him. But they are not anukula, they are pratikula. Like we say, anukula syena. Yeah. We want to actually follow Krishna anukula, favorably. We do not want to follow Krishna like the demons did, where they're constantly thinking about him, but in a very unfavorable way. So this is very, very unfavorable. So they actually were thinking about him all the time. They were in some kind of yoga, and they were thinking about him. And after thinking about him, they particularly had the opportunity to be killed by him and to be released from their different bodies. And this happens as Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. And then it happens as what we would call as Shishupala and Dantavakra, and then you have Ravana and Kumbhakarna. So you have these particular circumstances of 3 different births that are taken by Jaya and Vijaya, and they get so badly immersed in material energy that they had to get it out. And then they come back and they're constantly remembering. So Krishna wants to interact with devotees. So he never comes in touch with material nature, literally. So even when he is killing Hiranyakashipu, even when he is killing Ravana, so on and so forth, he is not in touch fully with material energy. He is not. He is actually chastising his devotee, because these two devotees are going to come back to Vaikuṇṭha, and their journey is going to continue eternally. There has never been a lapse, because that particular momentary lapse is a lapse that practically, in one sense, is a very small amount of time. The lapse of Jaya and Vijaya missing from Vaikuṇṭha is very, very small. But the particular opportunity they had was that they could play a role in the Leela of the Lord. They facilitated Leela. This facilitating of Leela is done by Sri Yogamaya. She is practically looking at this attitude of Jaya and Vijaya, and she is saying that this is there in the heart. Now we need players for the Lord's Leela. Because this is in your heart, you will play this unfavorable role. So everything is being ordained by the act of Krishna's internal potency, because Leela is all about internal potency. All the Leelas of the Lord is internal potency. So the killing and everything is internal potency. There really isn't the role of external potency. The external energy is not role. She doesn't have a role here. So he doesn't really come and play a role. He doesn't interact with the external energy. So he comes and he interacts and he kills them. And this is Yogamaya's presence saying, this is in the heart of Jaya and Vijaya, so we need to facilitate them. So it's an interesting chapter where Krishna practically begs forgiveness for the behavior of his devotees from other Vaishnavas. He also makes a statement that if my devotees misbehave, they will blame me. As a consequence, I'm responsible. And we see that oftentimes. Whenever someone misbehaves, then they immediately ask, who is the guru? As if the guru was responsible. This is a very, very bad thing to do. It's very bad to do, very, very bad to ask as if the guru is responsible for the behavior of the disciples. In one sense, he is, but then can you really say that he causes the behavior? So it's a very bad attitude and very, very bad question where people actually ask, who is the guru of this person? As if the guru is going to produce bad disciples and then he is responsible for it. It's a very, very bad attitude. So, but the point which I'm trying to make here is that Krishna makes the statement that if people misbehave, they're going to blame me because they are my devotees. And he says that these devotees can never be vanquished. So he is coming forth and is asking the Kumaras to forgive them. So Krishna is practically pleading for the devotees who have misbehaved, and the devotees themselves are pleading that they never forget Krishna while they are in the material world, and they're wanting to come back. They're dismayed of being separation, but then they're also wanting to just accept the responsibility. So we want to read this chapter, and we want to just understand. Just go through the verses, and we'll see what we can do. So this is chapter 16. The two doorkeepers of Vaikuṇṭha, Jaya and Vijaya, cursed by the sages. Lord Brahma said, after this congratulating the sages for the nice words, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose abode is the kingdom of God, spoke as follows. The Personality of Godhead said, these attendants of mine, Jaya and Vijaya by name, have committed a great offense against you because of ignoring me. See, this is exactly Kanishta behavior. Yeah. Take care of the deities, take care of the temple, ignore the devotees. This is Kanishta behavior. The extension of Krishna is the Vaishnava, because bhakti is carried in the heart of the Vaishnava. The giver of bhakti is the Vaishnava. It is the Vaishnava who is giving bhakti. So Krishna is constantly being connected to the world by the devotees. So how could Krishna ever give them a second place? We also notice out of the 64 qualities, one of the qualities of Krishna is basically prema madhurya. Prema madhurya essentially means that he is surrounded by devotees whose love for him is extraordinary. So he is practically giving himself an attribute which is superior to Sriman Narayana by saying that devotees who surround me are extraordinary. So the devotees form an attribute of the Lord. So when the devotees are ignored, then the Lord is ignored, which is what the point is being made here. He's saying By preventing you from coming in, by misbehaving with you, they have ignored me. O great sages, I approve of the punishment that you who are devoted to me have meted out to them. So he's approving of the punishment. To me, the Brahmana is the highest and the most beloved personality. The disrespect shown by my attendants has actually been displayed by me because the doormen are my servitors. I take this to be an offense by myself. Therefore, I seek your forgiveness for the incident that has arisen. So he's practically taking responsibility for the behavior of his subordinates, saying, if they have disrespected you, it is my responsibility. And whatever they have done has been done by me. It is not them. A wrong act committed by a servant leads people in general to blame his master, just as a spot of white leprosy on any part of the body pollutes all of the skin. Anyone in the entire world, even down to the Chandala, who lives by cooking and eating the flesh of a dog, is immediately purified if he takes birth in hearing through the ear the glorification of my name, fame, etc. Now you have realized me without doubt. Therefore, I will not hesitate to lop off my own arm if its conduct is found hostile to you. The Lord continued, because I am the servitor of my devotees. My lotus feet have become so sacred that they immediately wipe out all sin, and I have acquired such a disposition that the goddess of fortune does not leave me, even though I have no attachment for her, and others praise her beauty and observe sacred words to secure from her even a slight favor. This is more particularly observed in the behavior of devotees of Krishna in Vraja. You may not see this informal behavior occurring in Vaikuṇṭha lokas, because the Vaikuṇṭha lokas is all about formality. It is all about being able to treat with or deal with Krishna in a very formal way, and Narayan in a very formal way as a king would. But in Vraja, the cowherd boys fight with Krishna. They take sticks and they try to beat him up. Yeah, they sometimes come and lie down and then they're tired and then they ask Krishna to massage their feet. Sometimes they tell Krishna to carry them on their backs. So the cowherd boys, they display behavior which is quite extraordinary in terms of familiarity. It's called Bhakti Vishramba. Vishramba means that there really isn't any difference. They are displaying the mood of love where the friendship between the Lord and them is such that they don't want even the slightest level of formality to interfere. So this idea of Krishna wanting to serve his devotees and saying that I'm a servant of my devotees is more profoundly found in Vraja, because Krishna does that. He carries Nanda Maharaj's shoes. He is tied up by Mother Yashoda as if he's a small child, where he is in Gokul. These are just extraordinary pastimes. The cowherd boys very specifically show a lot of, I would say, behavior of equality, where he is practically treated as one of them to such an extent that, to ensure that the love between them flows unrestrictedly, they have all kinds of behavior just as two boys would have at a very young age. So this is very, 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 very highly displayed here. In Ramayana, Sri Lakshman, he was serving Lord Ram, and he is considered to be an intensely devoted servant. In fact, the whole concept of service comes from Sri Ramayana. Dasya Bhakti is exemplified in Ramayana. The service of Lord Hanuman, the service of Sri Lakshman towards Lord Ram, that particular service is the exemplary level of Dasya Bhakti. But there were so many restrictions for Lakshman to interact with his brother, so many restrictions of him being able to interact with him, because Lord Ram was very strict in his behavior and his whole interaction, because he was a king. So he was Maryada Purushottama. There was a great responsibility of the Lord to maintain Maryada, to maintain that particular stricture of code of conduct, and that was implemented very strictly by Lord Ram. So Lakshman felt highly restricted. But when he comes as Balaram in Krishna Leela, there is no restriction. He chastises him, he has unrestricted behavior with his brother, even though he is the servant of Godhead. He is practically Sevaka Bhagavan. He is manifesting his pastimes to serve Krishna, but then his behavior is completely unrestricted. And this is basically the wonderful nature of Vraja Bhakti, where the interaction between the devotee and Krishna is intimate, and this is not found in any other pastime. It is not found in any other avatar or incarnation of the Lord. It is only found in Vraja Bhakti, where the statement of my being a servant of the devotees is very profound. So this particular statement is very profound. And he is practically saying that they wipe out all the sin, but I am a servant of the devotees. My lotus feet wipe out all the sin, but I am a servant of the devotees. The goddess of fortune doesn't want to leave me, but I don't want to leave my devotees. I do not enjoy the oblations offered by the sacrifices in the sacrificial fire, which is one of my own mouths, with the same relish as I do the delicacies overflowing with ghee, which are offered to the mouths of the Brahmanas who have dedicated to me the results of their activities and who are ever satisfied with my prasad. This feeding of the Brahmanas, the Vaishnavas, I would say Vaishnavas, the feeding of the Vaishnavas is so important, and it is such an important activity, and it is considered to be of such great merit that in our system of Gaudiya Vaishnavas, in the Vaishnava lineage, we don't worship the Pitris. We don't engage in offering annual Shraddh and so on and so forth to those who have departed from our families. We don't. What we do instead is that we basically organize a very big feast. Then there's nice prasadam, the nice bhoga that is offered to the Lord. And then that bhoga is then distributed to the Vaishnavas. You can see that quite often in Vrindavan. The people celebrate their annual passing of different relatives. And then they give the name of the person who has passed away. And then based on the name of the person, they read the name of the person to the Lord. And, basically asking the Lord to forgive them and to give them an opportunity to engage in his service. And then they prepare this feast, which is offered to the Lord, and then they distribute it to the Vaishnavas. And through the mouth of the Vaishnavas, Krishna accepts the offerings and then relieves the ancestors of their sinful nature. So this is very extraordinary, and this is a very powerful, practical way to assist those who have departed, is to sponsor feasts. And if you do it in Vrindavan, it is very profound because they literally call sadhus. And these are people who are doing madhukari. They're dependent on the Lord. They go from door to door. So they literally call sadhus who are, dependent on the Lord in a lot of ways, and then offer them a feast. And then this is all wonderful because the Lord accepts it. And then the family is relieved of troubles. It's a very wonderful system. So this is what he's talking about here. Here he is saying that I relish the delicacies that are consumed by the Brahmanas. Now we notice this with Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur was invited by Advaita Acharya Prabhu, and he was asked to come on the occasion of Shraddh. And the idea was that Haridas Thakur would be given the plate as the honorary plate. There's an honorary plate during those ceremonies where the Lord has accepted it. He would be given that particular plate because the Lord will be accepting the offering through the mouth of that particular Brahmana. Srila Advaita Acharya called Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur was protesting. He was really protesting, saying, no, I'm not qualified. I'm a Muslim, I'm a Mohammedan. I'm not qualified at all to be partaking and then playing a role in the ceremony, which is from a Brahminical, it is a Brahminical ceremony because Advaita Acharya Prabhu was a Brahmana. So by division of society, he was a Brahmana. He was, of course, he exalted. He was an incarnation, but the point is that he was a Brahmana as well. So he was protesting, but then Advaita Acharya Prabhu, he pleased Mahaprabhu by inviting Haridas Thakur. He just pleased him so much because Haridas Thakur became the main honorary Brahmana that particular day, the Vaishnava. He was given that particular plate, which was offered to the ancestors. and which was offered to Krishna, not ancestors. Through his mouth, Krishna accepts it. And just as much as Krishna accepting it means everybody is satisfied. So the ancestors were also satisfied. Yeah. He insisted. So this is practically an implementation of Srila Advaita Acharya Prabhu's example. I am the master of my unobstructed internal energy, and the water of the Ganges is the remnant left after my feet are washed. That water sanctifies the three worlds along with Lord Shiva, who bears it on his head. If I can take the dust of the feet of the Vaishnava on my head, who will refuse to do the same? Yeah. If I can take the dust of the Vaishnava on my head, who will do the same? There is this incident that occurred in South India. In South India, of the 12 alvars, which is the main saints of the Ramanuja Sampradaya, almost most of them are not Brahmanas. They all come from communities which I wouldn't really call them as, when I say Brahmanas, I'm talking about, being born in a Brahmanical family. So in 10th century and so on and so forth, even before that, India, there were a lot of strictures in terms of who could come in, who could do this and who couldn't do that. There were a lot of rules and regulations based on the community that you're born to, because society was divided very carefully into four parts. And invariably, whoever is born in a Brahmanical family, would know from his father as to how to do things, etc. So he was in the Brahmanical line. Whoever is not in the Brahmanical line. So there was a lot of division in society based on that in ancient India. And sometimes the guna wouldn't be there, which means the quality of the person may not be Brahmanical, but yet they would claim that particular advantage because they were born in a family. So this is because in ancient society, there weren't too many occupations. There were just four. There were four different varnas, and you could be in one of them. And there were little slight variations of what you could do in that varna. Anyway, the point is, there was this devotee, an exalted devotee of Krishna, who was sitting on the banks of the river Kaveri in South India near Sri Rangam. If you've been to Sri Rangam in South India, the Kaveri is nearby. And this devotee was sitting on the banks of the river Kaveri. And he belonged to a community which wasn't considered to be what I would call as clean in their occupation, which means that if you're going to perform rituals for the Lord, then you would want to maintain some distance. So he was sitting on the banks there and he was engaging in meditation. He was engaging in chanting the glories of Krishna. The priest of the Sri Rangam temple, he came there to bring water so that he could basically bathe the Lord in the morning, for the morning service. He went to the temple, then he opens the door, and then he brings a pot from the temple and he goes to the river and he draws water from river and he's bringing it back. And at that point in time, he accidentally comes in touch with this devotee who's sitting on the banks of the river who doesn't belong to the Brahmanical community. And he comes in touch with him, as in there's a physical contact. So he practically goes back, has a bath again, empties the pot, fills it up again, and then brings it back. And the devotee who was on the banks of the river, who was basically, not of a higher division of society, feels great pain that he has practically obstructed the service of Lord Ranganatha. He starts running away from the river and he sits in a distance because he's afraid that I have committed an offense. So this Brahmana priest, he carries the pot of water. He goes back to the temple. As he goes back to the temple, he finds that the doors of the temple are completely shut. And he had left the doors open. So he opens and he tries to open the door. The doors are shut. And there's nobody inside who can open it. It is almost as if someone has shut it from inside. Nobody is there to open it. Then he hears a voice. The voice is of the Lord himself. He says that you have offended my devotee who was on the banks of the river. Unless you go around and carry him on your shoulders and go around the sanctum, or rather the temple walls 3 times, you cannot enter for my service. So this Brahmana practically drops the particular pot he carries. He runs to the river of wanting to find this devotee. As he runs to the river wanting to find the devotee who commits this offense, so-called offense, the devotee sees him running towards him in agitated mood, and he becomes afraid and he starts running. So this is a particularly funny episode of one devotee, actually chasing the other. And then he says, stop, stop, stop. I can't do my service. I need your help. Then finally, the one who is, running away stops. And then he asks him, how can I help you? I'm a very low level person. I'm just worthless. He says, no, this is the instruction of the Lord. Unless I carry you on my shoulder thrice and I circumambulate the walls of the temple, the Lord wouldn't accept any service. So I want to carry you. I have committed such a great offense in ignoring you, and I've committed such a great offense in dealing with you in such a manner. So he carries him, and then he practically cooperates, and then the doors open and the service begins. So the point being that the issue of how important the devotee is found in practically every Vaishnava Sampradaya. You can find it in as many instances of this kind of situations. So the Haridas Thakur situation in our Sampradaya, then there was this particular circumstance with the devotee in the Sri Sampradaya, given in the Sri Sampradaya. You can find it. So he practically says, Krishna, that if I can take the dust of the feet of the Vaishnava on my head, who will refuse to do the same? In reality, if you pay obeisances in the Dham, be it Mayapur and be it Vrindavan, when you pay obeisances, if your mood is not so much to pay obeisances to the Lord, but if your mood is to take the dust of the Vaishnavas who have come for parikrama, who are in the Dham and who are serving the Lord, the dust will fall on your head. If you get into that mood, the Dham would be revealed to us. If you're going to just see the Lord and pay obeisances to him, the Dham wouldn't be revealed. But the Dham would be revealed if you go in the mood of actually coming in touch with the dust. So when you are on the ground and you start meditating that my head is really in touch with the dust of the lotus feet of the Vaishnavas, the Dham would be revealed. That is the power of the dust of the lotus feet of the Vaishnavas. That is the power. The Brahmanas, this is the next verse 10. The Brahmanas, the cows, and the defenseless creatures are my own body. Those whose faculty of judgment has been impaired by their own sin, look upon these as distinct from me. They are just like furious serpents, and they're angrily torn apart by the bills of the vulture-like messengers of Yamaraj, the superintendent of sinful persons. So he's saying the Brahmanas, the cows, and the defenseless creatures. The defenseless creatures that are being referred to are women, children, old men. Two of our scriptures, Ramayana and Mahabharata, and Srila Jiva Goswami, he speaks of Mahabharata as being of such a high order. It's because both the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam are contained within the Mahabharata. In one sense, these are all occurred in the Mahabharata. Yeah, they've all occurred in the Mahabharata. So the Mahabharata is considered to be so wonderful, such an amazing scripture. And the Ramayana. In both of these scriptures, you will notice that the entire circumstance revolves around poor judgment with women. It revolves around poor judgment with women. It's basically Draupadi in the Mahabharata, and then you have Mother Sita in Sri Ramayana. There's practically the loss of longevity caused by misbehaving with women in both scriptures. It is almost as if our main scriptures talk about this topic as conveying the importance of the topic so that people could keep this in mind. Yeah, this particular scripture, Ramayana and Mahabharata, talk about the idea that if you misbehave and if you basically ill-treat, then you're going to lose your longevity, which is basically the message that's been conveyed. There is no middle path here. You're going to lose your life. That's the message. Now, verse 11. On the other hand, they captivate my heart who are gladdened in the heart and who their lotus faces enlightened by nectarian smiles respect the Brahmanas, even though the Brahmanas utter harsh words. Here, Krishna is saying in this particular verse that even if the Brahmanas utter harsh words, if someone is able to smile and give them the due respect and to pacify them, then they are very dear to me. They look upon the Brahmanas as my own self and pacify them by praising them in loving words, even as a son would appease an angry father, or as I am pacifying you. These servants of mine have transgressed against you, not knowing the mind of their master. I shall therefore deem it a favor done to me If you order that, although reaping the fruit of their transgression, they may return to my presence soon, and the time of their exile from my abode may expire before long. So this is Krishna pleading the case. This is Krishna pleading the case. Even though the sages had been bitten by the serpent of anger, their souls were not satiated with hearing the Lord's lovely and illuminating speech, which was like a series of Vedic hymns. The Lord's excellent speech was difficult to comprehend because of its momentous import and its most profound significance. The sages heard it with wide open ears and pondered it as well, but although hearing, they could not understand what he intended to do. I want to stop here because it's 7 o'clock and I want to take a few questions. But what we wanted to convey here in these 15 verses was the fact that there could be many reasons for a Vaishnava to fall down, and we ought to be very careful so that we don't engage in prajalpa, we don't engage and churn up the gossip columns, especially now in the social media generation. There's so much being discussed in social media where there's no authority for such discussions. It is just unbelievable. I see discussions in Facebook of Srila Prabhupada's eternal identity, as if it is a cheap thing. The eternal identity of the Guru is not a cheap discovery. It is what is revealed when the disciple surpasses the modes of nature and is fully aware of his nature, then he understands the Guru's nature. How can you discuss this in social media where there's heavy discussion going on about what Srila Prabhupada is, whether he is a cowherd boy, whether he is a servant of Srimati Radharani, and so on and so forth. It is just fascinating to see how people assume that you could discuss topics so lightly, which basically are a part of how we evolve. This is how we are supposed to evolve. In other words, these are topics that basically are not very useful. Yeah, because it's a very confidential message. The nature of the Guru, which is the eternal nature of the Guru, the particular personality of the Guru, who he is in connection to Krishna, is a revelation which is an extraordinarily powerful milestone for the disciple as they chant their japa and they understand who their Guru is in the service of Krishna and Radharani. So it is not something where you can just discuss it and then winnow arguments by presenting what I would call as counter arguments. So I'm just giving an example as to the kind of very confidential topics that get discussed as if they mean nothing in social media. And that is the age we are in. And it's a dangerous time because good messages can be conveyed and there can also be bad messages. Both can be conveyed profoundly and it can leave impressions. And then it's almost like a samskara. It is like a polluted, it's like a blot of ink or a blot of paint that has just fallen on a spotless dhoti. And then we suffer through it. We see that a lot in today's world. So we spoke of the fact that sometimes Krishna ordains it. He ordains that devotees fall down. And he ordains it because he sees that the person is struggling. And because of this particular struggle, he wants the devotee to come out of the struggle and he pushes him to experience what he desires or she desires. And by pushing them to experience what she or he desires, he practically exposes the truth of the desire, which is duality. He exposes the truth of all kinds of challenges the person would have because of the desire. Then the person becomes purified of the desire, and then they're able to continue service in a steady way. So sometimes it is ordained, which is what we notice in this particular chapter. And we need to recognize it by the nature of the devotees and their behavior after such an event has transpired, if they were to continue being a part of the movement, but in a very humble spirit, and they chant and they take up the chanting of Harinam and service, etc. And then you notice that, yes, this is Krishna's manner, this is, Krishna's way of purifying them. So we wanted to discuss that. We also wanted to highlight the extraordinary nature of how much Krishna considers his devotees. And when we ignore the devotees, this is Kanishta behavior. This is Kanishta as in, if you're taught Krishna consciousness by family tradition, but you haven't really read through the scriptures and understood the exalted nature of Vaishnavas, then this behavior can come where you will learn to treat Krishna one way and the devotees another way. This duality of ill-treating the Vaishnavas but then treating the deity with great care is Kanishta behavior. That is what is being exposed here, where he says that they have forgotten me, they are ignoring me. He is practically saying that Jaya and Vijaya are ignoring me because they have forgotten that my devotees are more dear to me than my own self. So this is being conveyed by him as well. Finally, we spoke of the fact that Krishna himself says that he particularly applauds the protection of the Brahmanas, the cows, and women, old men, and children. And whenever those are hurt, then that particular segment of society is doomed to fail. And we notice that in our scriptures as well. So I'm going to stop here. We'll take the rest of the verses next week, and I'll take any questions if you may have.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for wonderful points and for a wonderful class. It's been very insightful. Just like to ask the question about in the spiritual world. You hear about like desire trees, kalpavrikshas. So, like you were saying about the duality of treating Krishna differently and treating devotees differently. Can you just like describe how Prabhupada talks about devotees being places of spiritual pilgrimage, like and how devotees are like kalpavriksha trees, and the pure devotees are able to fulfill the desires of the living being, the
Sure.
conditions.
See, the fundamental fact that is conveyed to us in Madhurya Kadambini, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Rupa Goswami, is the fact that Bhakti is not controlled by Krishna. Bhakti Devi, the potency of service to Krishna, is not controlled and managed by him. Because Bhakti Devi does not reside in the heart of Krishna. She resides in the heart of the Vaishnavas. The devotees carry Bhakti in their hearts. Bhakti is Abhida, Bhakti is Abhideya, which is service. So this mood of service is carried by the devotees. And this is basically the mood of service that has been conveyed from the heart of Srimati Radharani through disciplic succession, and then it comes to us. Yeah. So this is basically, we are all followers of Srimati Radharani. In other words, the mood of service has come from her. And she carries the greatest amount of bhakti. And that bhakti has been transferred as we serve the devotees. So as we serve the devotees, then what does happen is that bhakti in their heart enters into our heart through the messages and through mercy, because the devotee starts thinking that this person is so sincere, and I wish they could take up Krishna consciousness. I wish they could give up their obstacles and then become successful. So when that particular thought comes in the heart of those who are being served, then bhakti leaves their heart. When I say leave, it doesn't mean that their heart becomes empty. It simply means that she can go from their heart as an origin to the heart of those who are serving. This is displayed by Sri Narad Muni. Narad Muni was the son of a maidservant who practically surrendered to the great personalities who visited the ashram during Chaturmas and honored the remnants left by the great personalities after taking their permission. The remnants and honoring the remnants of the Vaishnavas is considered to be a position of surrender. Exalted Vaishnavas is considered to be a position of surrender to those Vaishnavas if they give permission. Then accepting the honor, accepting that particular prasad, they accept it, and then basically Narad Muni, who was the son of a maidservant, becomes Sri Narad Muni, the great personality, purely based on the potency of accepting Mahaprasad from the lips of a great personality, the sages. So bhakti is controlled by the heart of the devotees. The process of bhakti and faith that we receive, Shraddha, comes from the heart of devotees. And as a consequence, there cannot be any minuscule, there can't be a circumstance, minimized circumstance for the devotees. One can't even imagine how exalted devotees are. It really can't be a circumstance where you can minimize the devotees, because that's where we receive our bhakti. So they are kalpavriksha trees, because anything you desire comes from the kalpavriksha tree in wanting to serve. In a similar manner, when the devotees are served, when the exalted devotees are served, then that particular aspect of bhakti in their heart manifests into our heart. And then we have the ability to render further service. So sambandha, Krishna sambandha, comes from those who have sambandha. If you have nothing in our heart, then what is there to give anyways? We don't have anything in our heart. So how could we give? How could we give something that we don't possess? And how could we receive from those who don't possess? So Krishna has relegated this concept of bhakti and the distribution of his bhakti to his devotees. It comes from their heart. And as a consequence, he's saying we have to prioritize the Vaishnavas because he exists and his bhakti exists in their hearts. So that's the position being given by the acharyas as kalpavriksha trees. This is very important. And this is a culturation. One needs to culture this. Right from the beginning, one needs to culture. And this information, even though it requires faith to accept this information, but if one accepts this information sincerely and says, I'm going to make an attempt to somehow or the other serve the Vaishnavas, then they are assured of opportunities for growth. They are assured of opportunities for growth because then bhakti in the heart of the Vaishnavas is looking at the soul who is serving this Vaishnava and saying, oh, this devotee could potentially be a servant, so let me give an opportunity. So she goes into their heart and cultivates and grows. So that's how it works.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for the wonderful points.
Prabhuji, can I ask a question,
Hare
please?
Yes, please. Please go on.
Yes. So my question on this is doubt and everything. This question is doubt anyway. You mentioned about this when Guru fall down or does devotee fall down. So if Guru fall down, what happened to disciples? And plus then if Guru realized what he done wrong, why fell down, and he want to improve and just come back to the same position, how do they do it?
Yes. See, the position, the behavior that is to be accorded is displayed in Srimad Bhagavatam. We had Lord Brahma falling down, right? In the previous few chapters, he had some confusion because he was in touch with passion and ignorance, and he falls down. He chases after his own offspring, and as a consequence, he gets chastised. What does he do? He loses his position. He is chastised, he is corrected by his sons who are exalted sages, but they honor him, they remind him that you're a great personality, you shouldn't be behaving like this. And then he decides that I can't be like this. I can't be in this position of authority because there will always be all kinds of doubts caused by my position to others in their minds. So he gives up that body and he comes back in a different body to continue his service. So this is what happens in Srimad Bhagavatam. Similarly, during the time of Lord Chaitanya, when there was an offense committed where a guru or a sannyasi basically commits an offense, they used to actually give up their life because this was basically ordained by scripture. They used to go and drown in the Gangaji or Yamunaji, wherever. This is what they used to do in those days. Now, what is the situation in the present time? The present time is that if a guru falls down, then that particular upadhi, that role, that particular position, it should not be assumed by that person unless he starts inspiring devotees again, which means, for example, he starts giving classes again. Krishna uses him to attract the devotees, and he is able to attract more and more souls because of his potency, because he's connected to Krishna. So it should be a natural situation, not so much by appointment. So if a guru falls down, he's fallen down until he can re-establish his position in that particular order, which is basically what we see in the Srimad Bhagavatam, if you were to look at Lord Brahma's example. He needs to prove by example that he can practically attract and inspire others. So this inspiration has to come again. Yeah. So he cannot continue in that position just because he was something before, because he has already interrupted the particular position, he has destroyed it. See, this destruction of a position is a destruction of a concept. It is an idea. It is almost as if someone has gotten an immense amount of faith from that particular situation. It is better that that disturbance which has already occurred should also be removed. It is not very healthy for the disciple to constantly look at his guru and start doubting him, saying, oh, he did it once, maybe he will do it again. See, these are all things which are very problematic. So in reality, if the disciple finds that the guru has fallen down and has given up his standards, then the disciple should find another guru and connect to the parampara. That is why in our parampara, we encourage Siksha connections. There are so many Siksha connections that support the devotional life of a devotee. As a consequence, the Siksha Guru is considered to be the same as the Diksha Guru as far as Krishna is concerned. Both are inspiring, but the roles are quite different. The Siksha Guru supports the disciple in their journey, in their sadhana. The Diksha Guru places the feet of the disciple in the spiritual sky. If the Diksha Guru falls down, then there can be others who can do that particular role. But then the Shiksha Guru can support the disciple as they continue further in their journey. I hope this answers your question.
That's definitely, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Very, very clear. It just cleared my mind from the old, thinking what happened, what disciple do it, where they go, or disciple give up as well, everything, things like that. It's just thank you so much. And second question, I got to move on. When you mentioned to the just people can do like bhoga offering on the ancestors.
Right.
But we heard a lot of people, we heard if we do like that, then people hesitate to have a prasad from there. They say, oh, they have done for the pitro, they have done for the person passed away. We shouldn't eat. We will get their karmas on us. These sort of things I heard. How far is true, Prabhuji? Can you clear that?
Yes, you see, when you offer it directly to the pitris, that point is correct. Yeah, eating from the plate that has been offered to the pitris will definitely be heavy in terms of karmic reactions. We don't want to do that. We don't want to engage in that activity. But what I was giving you as an example was that, for example, a few months back, I sponsored a feast here in Vrindavan in Radha Damodarji Mandir. And this was for my grandfather. And when I sponsored this feast, what did they do? They practically took the name of my grandfather, took the name of, this general instructions and general information about my grandfather. They presented it to Sri Sri Radha Damodarji and requested that Sri Sri Radha Damodarji bless that person so that he could move on and he could be delivered. And then they offered, as they normally do, they offered bhoga for the pleasure of the deities. And then the prasad was distributed to the Vaishnavas. So this is not Pitri Prasad, this is Krishna Prasad. There is no reaction here. There's a big difference. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I meant. Just when we do sponsor prasad in temple for that sort of a purpose, then some people still say, oh, they have done for this and that. We shouldn't have it.
No, that particular thing is right. But at the same time, if it is done as Krishna Prasadam, which is offered in bhoga,
that's what I'm talking about. So if it's in the temple,
then that is a wrong understanding. If that is a wrong understanding, it is a wrong understanding.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Thanks a lot.
Sure. Hare Krishna. Dandavat. Yes. Elena, you had a question, I believe.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I wanted to share something that about over 20 years ago, our temple also went through this direct experience of a guru falling down and leaving, and in California, and that shattered the entire yatra. There was such a confusion and split inside because we were in very close association, and so we were sent a great association with senior devotees, Japtaka Swami, Hridayananda Maharaj, Lokanath Swami, every week somebody was coming to support us. And there were a lot of talk from Shastras, and his own disciples scattered and took some shelter of Shiksha gurus and some formal reinitiated. But over 20 years now, I heard something that truly soothed my heart, because from the perspective of the soul and how it all works. So I'm really grateful for how you described it, because it finally made sense. So I
Oh.
appreciate it. Thank you very much. And
Not at
also,
all.
this all very much made sense finally, because that's only way to see it, because nobody could bring themselves, we were just in shock, but nobody could bring themselves to speak ill of the person who we knew on such an intimate level for a day and night, for so long time. So just was utter, we were lost. And so we could not just find refuge in whatever, in distancing immediately, but this just made sense. So I also wanted to say that somehow what you say, the way you presented, the way that you approach it, when you expressed what is important to Krishna, it's again aligns. Somehow it skips my personal awareness, how important that we get caught up, I get caught up in the service to the Lord, and then completely forget, can tramp over the devotees. And that's just, again, like a light bulb goes on. So I just wanted to express how much I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Not
Hare
at all.
Krishna.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us. And then I was just wanting to make a mention about this great devotee. There was this Mataji. I have spoken about her in the past. Taruni, can you mute yourself for a moment? Yeah, if you could mind. Yeah, and we could. Thank you. So there was this devotee who Srila Prabhupada disciple, and this mother, she was basically, her mood was so firmly situated in Krishna consciousness in such a way. She was actually very advanced. She was very, very advanced. And I don't know, for some reason, my mind is just, I can't remember her name for some reason. I used to basically, talk about her and read about her a lot, but for some reason I just forget, but that's fine. The point is that she speaks of a certain incident. She was serving in the Columbus, Ohio temple, and the authorities walked in one day when she was in the kitchen and started yelling at her, saying that the garbage is overflowing in the kitchen. And she's a very senior, very sincere person, and her point, or rather her ability to concentrate, was so intense and so great that she would hang beads in front of her while she's cutting vegetables, because there was no time. She used to wake up at 2, and she was the only pujari in New Vrindavan for 3 sets of deities, and she used to be practically doing all the offerings. So there was no time. She used to hang the beads in front of her when she's cutting the vegetables, and she is practically used to what I would call as make this offering to Jagannath. And she used to read, and she used to practically count the beads as they're hanging. That was her power of concentration. She used to complete her rounds when there was so much. And she used to keep books open all over the kitchen. So whenever the milk is boiling, she'll read a page. Whenever something else is happening, she'll read a page. So she was very exalted, extraordinarily, very advanced. And when she was in Columbus and this person shouted at her processing of the event was very different. All of us would probably have gotten very agitated, but she didn't. She practically processed it as Krishna wants me to take out the garbage. So what I'm trying to say is that we need to learn to process everything as Krishna wanting us to do something. So this is basically how effective it would be if we were able to do that, because it will help us immensely. I was just wanting to mention that. So yeah, Taruni, rather, you can ask the question. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry. By mistake, it was...
No, don't worry. Don't worry at all. You go ahead.
Thank you so much for the class, Prabhuji. I was just messaging about how grateful I feel today for your explanation, because I too also had so many questions in my mind lingering about certain aspects, and today's class was just so beautiful. It gave clear instructions as to what needs to be done and how to process it. So very grateful for that, Prabhuji. And my question today was, at the beginning of the class, you were mentioning how as we chant, we also start to feel some pain for others who are suffering. So just yesterday, I got to speak to some of my relatives because it's festival in India. So I called them up, and then they are like going through so much of pain. Just seeing them, probably it's material attachment that I'm feeling, because the same thing has happened to other people over here. I don't know whether I would feel so much for them. So I was just feeling so disturbed, and I understand from your perspective, and I'd also spoken to you about them. Like, it's karmical basically, and there's nothing much that I can do other than pray. But then it just pains my heart so much that these souls are suffering so much, just taking shelter of Krishna. Maybe we don't know, Krishna might change the situation. So how can, from my end, I can just pray for them, but that pain that I feel, how do I address that, Prabhuji? How does it go away?
You mean the pain goes away? Your question is about how do you remove the pain?
Yeah, how do I feel so sad of like I am unable to get over that feeling of feeling so sad for them. So I don't know if that is the correct mood, because we need to be, a devotee should be in a joyful mood to serve Krishna, right? So
That is true. Yeah, that is true. We need to be in a joyful mood, but it doesn't mean that we are machines. So we have emotions, and as a consequence, if there is a disturbance to those who are dear to us, then we are going to be overwhelmed. But the point is that we never could or never should allow it to interrupt our service. Arjuna cried miserably in the arms of Krishna when Abhimanyu passed away. He was uncontrollable, because that is exactly how a father would behave if a child leaves. This is just how it is, a part of how people express their emotions. There really isn't any shortcut there. So we can't really be machines. So we don't want to become insensitive to who we are. That's not an issue, feeling overwhelmed. But we don't want to be overwhelmed to the point where it affects the Krishna consciousness, where we can't serve. So that's the message. That's the first point. The second point is, when we find family members are suffering, then we want to offer prayers. And we want to offer prayers in such a way that we are able to offer prayers to Krishna in such a way that they receive help. And we want to give him the option of how he wants to help them. So we want to say that if you so desire, help this person, but please do what you please and whatever is most important for them. So we want to give them that option. So we just offer prayers. That is basically what we do. And Vaishnava prayers are very, very powerful because Krishna hears them. So we can never minimize Vaishnava prayers. This is a very important thing. So I would encourage that you offer prayers, and that would allow you to connect to the Lord when you offer prayers, and that in itself would allow you to transcend your emotions and your grief, etc. That is what we can do from our side. And in addition, do whatever it takes from a practical basis. If they need help and if you can offer help, be practical about it. You can also be very practical in rendering help. So see what the best way for you to help them, and help them. That is what you're supposed to do. So there's both a practical aspect to it and there's a prayer aspect to it. And the prayer aspect, we want to give Krishna the opportunity to do what he needs to do. We don't want to demand that this is the outcome. We want to say that if you so desire, please do what is best for them, because they seem to be suffering. So yes, this is necessary, and it is not something which is a matter of difficulty. If we feel overwhelmed by relatives suffering, etc., we don't want to become cold-hearted and inert. We are not machines. We have emotions, and we have, I would say we're still working through our attachments. As a consequence, we don't want to deny them. We want to bring them to Krishna. So take all of this and go to Krishna and present it, and then give, and then that in turn would give you satisfaction because you're in touch with Krishna.
Sure, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for your very nice answer, Prabhuji. Very grateful to you, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
I can take a couple of questions if you have time. Yeah, I mean, if you have any questions, maybe one. Yeah. Okay, there seems to be something from the chat. I was speaking. Okay, one moment. I just want to see if it's a question. Okay. All right. So this is not a question, but there's someone who is wanting to reach out to me. Can I just request whoever has written? Just give me one moment. Can I just request whoever has written? I believe it is Girish. You can go to my website and you will find my WhatsApp, or you could ask Mayapur for my WhatsApp, and please feel free to write to me on my WhatsApp. I would be able to communicate to you. Thank you. Yes, please go on. I just want to. Yeah, sure. What was your question? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for your class. It's very insightful and thought-provoking also. Prabhu, I just wanted to ask you, like normally we familians sometimes for the Tithi, we do, we earlier before coming to Krishna consciousness, you used to offer to the picture, you know, you do sometimes we bring a priest and do things. But afterwards, when we don't do that, we always offer to the Lord, and then we offer that prasadam too. But can devotee or the person in the family can have that plate after offering? Because once we asked this question, one devotee only said that's normally we put it for the like dogs or cats like that, but for not to waste, sometimes devotee also can have it. Not everybody, like, okay, the father is there, the son can have like that. Is that correct, Prabhu? Because I just wanted to understand it correctly.
Yeah, in general, what happens is from the perspective of getting connected to the Pitris, if you want to ask me as to which is the biggest struggle of jivas and the planet, the biggest karma, it is from the Pitris. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's nothing more intense than issues with the Pitris and the ancestors, because you know that burden is so intense, and it is also very difficult to resolve. It is not something which is easy to resolve. So in those circumstances, I would play it safe. For example, you kind of you connect anything to Krishna, and if it is done properly, then you can accept that prasadam. Then it is wonderful. But then there is no Pitri connection there. Yeah. But if you can't connect it to Krishna, then you're directly connecting to the Pitris, and then the family has so many challenges and so on, so many generational challenges. All of those are a part of all those ceremonies. So it's just too intense.
Yeah, but no, Prabhu, this is what I just wanted to, yeah, that was before. But now, if you offer to the Lord, and then we obviously everybody will have prasadam, that is Krishna prasadam. And then before that, we will offer a plate, and we don't mix with that. But that plate will be consumed by somebody in that family. Do you think it is not good?
That you offer a plate to whom?
To the Pitri. Because
it is it is generally not done. In the Vaishnava circles, it is not done.
So you shouldn't take that plate.
Yeah, we know it is not offered. It is never offered to the Pitris. We never offer a plate to the Pitris. We offer bhoga to Krishna and distribute to the Vaishnavas as you would in any temple program. That's it. We don't offer a plate from the prasadam which has come from Krishna, then offer it to a picture which is there of the family member who has passed away. We don't do that.
Oh, okay. Oh my God. He asked that actually when a devotee said, okay, because that was a practice always we were offering straight to. And because now you're not doing it, you can offer that Krishna prasadam to the picture.
No, there's no need. There's no connection. See, we don't connect to people who are past. We are simply connecting to our duty towards those in the lineage you are born in. Yeah, whoever passed away, we do not know which family they are born in. We don't know. But then we have duties towards those who have started that family line from the Pitris, all the way back to the time when the world began to be created. So we don't offer, period, we don't offer plates to those who have passed away. We offer Krishna and we feed the Vaishnavas. Krishna accepts it through the Vaishnavas, and then the blessing of the Vaishnavas goes to the people who have passed away.
Okay. If you want, you can do a Narasimharati or something.
You could do that. You could have variations. Yeah, I'm not even. Yeah.
Okay, but not the prasadam. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Oh my God. Okay. This was done for many years.
That's all right. It's okay. It's all right. It's not a heavy thing, but I just wanted you to be clear that it is not required.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for.
Sure. Okay. Anybody else before we go for the week? All right. So we will call it a week, and thank you very much for joining me. Then this next week, I will advise you on whether we're going to have a class, because I'm traveling, and as a consequence, I may not be able to give class next week. So I will advise you in advance as to what we could do for the following week. Okay. Hare Krishna, and wish all of you a safe week ahead.